welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Good, good. So you're a geobiologist. What is a geobiologist?
Geobiologist, quite easy to describe. It's basically the study of the effect of the environment upon a living organism in a positive or a negative way.
And how do you measure that?
How do you measure that? There's many ways of measuring it. The old dowsing, basically. If you imagine this hazel stick and the dowsers and the rod drops down when they find water. It's basically similar to that. It's using the body as the receptor, because it's the body that picks up all these subtle vibrations. And the dowsing rods, the stick or the antenna or whatever you use, the pendulum or whatever, it's just an amplifier, so you can actually see what your body is feeling. So it's your body that actually captures the signal of what you're looking for, which is usually an electromagnetic signal, or even it's in the picovolts. It's microscopic, but your body picks it up, and you can become more sensitive to it through training. It's just like bodybuilding, basically, and the antenna will drop down or the pendulum will turn in a certain way. It's because your body is actually telling it to do that. It's actually making it do that. It feels, to disassociate, it feels like it's happening automatically on its own, but it's actually your body that's directing the antenna to go down. So it's just an amplifier, so you can see it.
So I'll tell you, there's a friend of ours used to be our neighbours in the city. They moved out to the countryside, and they were drilling for geothermic. Yeah. And they got the drilling company out, and they kept drilling down, not catching what they needed, drilling down. So after two, they said, right, there's something to do with insurance, and said, listen, if you get this guy in, we'll keep drilling until we find something, okay? And if you don't, then, you're going to have to keep paying. So he said, all right. So this fella turned up, with the flat cap and the dowsing rods. And, so he walked around, the sticks crossed or whatever it happened. And, he said, right, drill here, drill down straight away, no problem. And he also said, he went around the house and he did some sort of energy reading in the house. This is what my friend, this guy's worked in the oil business as an engineer, very scientific based guy. And so he was a little bit skeptical, and he walked around the house and told him certain things. And, so I was looking after their house for a little bit, and because they had a dog, they were on holiday, and, I slept in this one room, and I just had the worst night's sleep. I couldn't sleep, and I'm usually a pretty good sleeper. So I had to go and sleep on the sofa. And then when they came back, they said, "Oh yeah, the dowsing rod guy says don't sleep in that room because you're right above an underground river, and the energy's bad, and you'll have a terrible night's sleep."
But it can actually have worse effects on you as well. It can be. It's a long subject, but it can be an exacerbator for cancer. There's been a lot of studies that have been done. And I think the first study that was done that had any kind of value was in 1929 by a dowser in Bavaria called Gustav von Pohl. And he took his team of dowsers into this village, Wilsberg, I think it was, and they mapped out all the geopathic stress in the village. And they mapped it out onto a plan of the village.
Did you say geopathic stress?
Geopathic stress. Okay. It's geopathic, geo from the earth, pathic, pathos, the effect, and the geopathic stress, which can be anything from underground water sources, which are very, very, very dangerous, or underground water streams. They can be, then we go into the grid lines like the Hartmann, the Curry, the Weissman, the Piri. It's, they're everywhere, these things. And they mapped out all these lines and underground sources and currents onto the map. And then they overlaid that map onto a plan of the village. on the houses. Okay. And then they got all the records of cancer death in the village, and they laid that over the map. And 100% of all cancer deaths in the village were over geopathic stress. And it was irrefutable evidence. Mm-hmm. And so they then went to another village and they did the same test, and then 100% again. And then in the years between that, they went back to Wilsberg, and there'd been some new cancer deaths. And these were all over lines of geopathic stress. But geopathic stress doesn't necessarily cause cancer. I mean, cancer is it's a complicated disease, but it is quite simple. I mean, we have the body produces cancer cells every day, and we have what's called killer T cells, our white cells. Remember that film, The Fantastic Voyage, when Donald Pleasance gets that white cell and gets eaten? But that's going back away in the old films. But these killer T cells, they come and eat these cancer cells, and so there's no problem. It's the immune system. But the problem occurs when the immune system is diminished. And geopathic stress can cause the immune system to diminish. But then again, also a lot of other things can. Bad lifestyle, too much drinking, too much smoking, all sorts of things can cause your immune system to actually become deficient. And when it becomes deficient to a certain level, what happens is these cancer cells, as opposed to being eaten all the time, they can start floating around in the body. And the interesting thing about geopathic stress is that it actually tells the cancer where to develop. Because you imagine you're lying in a bed at night, and it's where you lie for long periods of time. It's like a geopathic stress analysis should be concentrated around the bedrooms, because that's where you spend a third of your life. And so you'll be asleep in the bed. And even though you move around, you tend to be in the same axis, in the same place, especially when you go to sleep. And the crossings of these lines, you might get, let's say, a crossing of a Hartmann line, and if that is also on an underground water current, it multiplies this negative energy. And what happens? It's like a laser beam that comes up through the earth and comes out, and it goes way up into the sky. And so if you're lying there, let's say with one of these lines coming up through your lower stomach, your lower torso, it's like food for these cancer cells, because a cancer cell takes 8 times more energy to develop than a normal cell. So they're very energivore, these things. That's why alternative cancer treatment, it's like reinforcing the immune system and cutting out sugar, things like that give all this energy. So you imagine these cancer cells are floating around in your body, and then there's this laser beam of energy coming up through your lower abdomen. I mean, the cancer cells are like, hey guys, there's a free buffet over here. And they all go and they collect there, and they feed off this energy. And so then you will get, let's say, prostate cancer. Or a woman will get maybe cancer of the ovaries or the uterus. And so it doesn't cause cancer, although it can be a factor, but it does dictate where cancer is. And I've been into hundreds of houses. I mean, I've done thousands of analysis of houses. And for cancer patients, even post-mortem, after death. And I can go in, I can say exactly where the cancer was in the body. I mean, any good geobiologist can do that, because it's virtually centimetre perfect. You can go, okay, there's a point there. Yep, left breast.
Is that accurate?
It's that accurate.
Wow. So how do you become a geobiologist? Where did your story start?
The story starts, subtle energy, I think is the phrase to use. When I was 6 years old, back in Yorkshire, my dad's best friend, his parents had an old farm, a farm, and it was one of these it's up near behind Addingham in West Yorkshire. And it's up on the top of a hill with a forest next to it. It's a typical scenario, middle of nowhere kind of place. And we used to go up there quite a lot. And it's an old farmhouse, we went up there one evening to have dinner. Everyone was sitting in the kitchen, which is usually on one side, the back kitchen, they call them. And we were there, and I was 6 years old. I said, "All right, I'm off to the toilet." So I trotted out the kitchen into the middle of the ground floor, and then there's a staircase that went upstairs, and then there was a corridor that ran along the whole of the top floor with the bedrooms going off it. And so I went upstairs, down the corridor, into the toilet at the end, had a pee, came out, and then instead of going back down the same way, there's a little tiny staircase that spiraled down into like a library, a study on the other side of the building. And I walked down these stairs, and I met somebody on the way up, and it was a lady, and I smiled, and I said, "Hello." She smiled back, which is apparently when you're into paranormal, ghosts reacting. There's different schools of thought, but this lady smiled at me. So I walked past her. Little did I know, I actually walked through her. Went back into the kitchen, and I said, "Oh, who's the nice old lady who lives next door?" And Ada, who was my dad's best friend's mum said, "Pardon?" I said, "Yeah, the nice old lady who lives next door." She goes, "Well, there's no old lady who lives next door." I said, "Yes, there is." I said, I've just met her." And she goes, "Well, we're in a farmhouse. There is no next door, Roger." I said, "Oh, well, the nice old lady." She goes, "What does she look like?" And I said, "Well, she had like a black dress, a white pinafore, a white apron. She had grey hair tied back, and she smiled at me. She goes, 'Oh yes, that old lady, that nice old lady. Oh yes, okay.'" So then she took my mum on one side, and she said, "Do you know, he's just given the perfect description of the ghost who haunts this farm and 2 other farms. And she normally appears to children because she was a midwife." And she said, "George, my husband's seen her." But she says, "I've never seen her, but she's, I can hear her quite often." And so when I was told this, that I'd seen this ghost, basically I had the veil ripped away from in front of me. The veil that separates our perceived reality and the rest. And since then, I've just been on a mission to since I've been 6 to the big philosophical questions: who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? And all sorts of other questions. And because it's a two-way street, the more you look into it, the more it looks back. And so it was then just a series of coincidences, which I don't believe in. Synchronicities that just keep raining down, that has led me, through my whole life now. I became a professional sportsman. I went to Aviemore, became a ski instructor. Then I came to Cham, got into ski photography, or skiing for photographers, made Britain's first 2 ski films, been all over the world, lived the dream. I was sponsored by Dina Star for many years after being with Salomon, and I've lived the skiing dream. But interspersed with that, there's always been this other part that's just kept coming back, and coming through. And I'm always being reminded that it's there, even when I've tried to leave it behind, basically. And I used to do a lot of paraponting. I think got over 2,000 flights or something, B+ flights, flown for films and stuff like that. And there was once where it was an amazing day here in the Chamonix Valley. And at the end of the day, an evening flight, the best evening flight is go up the Grand Montée, take off, and then you can fly around the Drou, sometimes over the top of the Drou up to the Aiguille Verte, and it's just amazing. And I was a bit late that day, and I charged up, got the last Ben up there, got to take off, and everyone was already specking out. Specking out is when people are just going huge. It was like a blue thermal day. So there's not many clouds, but everything is going up all over the place.
So you're ascending. You can
ascending, yeah. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've missed this. Everyone's over the Dru up onto the Aiguille Verte. So I took off, started winding a thermal up near the Dru off the Flamme de Pierre, got really high. And then this weird sensation came over me. It was just a need, a decision, a hand pushing me that said to me, don't go up there. Turn round and go there. And so I turned around, and normally when things start going off a bit over the Grand Montet, we cross the Argentière Glacier in a transition flight. We get onto the Peclaret, which then leads up the shoulder onto the Chardonnay. And you usually do that towards the end of the flight. And this was really early. And I thought, I put my accelerator on. I'm flying over the Argentière Glacier, getting lower and lower and lower because the sun hadn't come round. I'm thinking, what a fucking idiot I've been. I mean, I'm just going to go down now. I'm missing one of the biggest days. And so I flew into the towards the base of the Chardonnay on the Peclaret Ridge, and I'm circling between two thermals, just maintaining, going up a little bit, and I'm looking at everybody skying out over the Aiguille Verte, and I'm maintaining, and I'm thinking, oof, this isn't looking good. And then I see probably 300 feet below me, cruising down the edge of the glacier, is an eagle. And this eagle comes, huge eagle. I mean, this must like 2 meters 50 wingspan. I mean, it was just gobsmacking. This eagle came in underneath me and starts winding the same thermal. I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. And this eagle comes up right to my wingtip, and he's circling with me. And he's looking at me, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on here? And he looks at me, and he goes, ah! Turns, and I'm thinking, my God, he's just asked me to follow him. So I turn accelerator, and this is going into the Argentière Glacier. So we go, start making a transition. And this eagle flies virtually to the base of the Chardonnay and starts circling in a thermal. He said he's showing you where this thermal is. Fly in, wind it up, him on my wingtip. He flies up. I'm flying up with him. He looks at me. He goes, wah! Turns and heading deeper into the Argentière Glacier. So I follow him again. Going further into the glacier. He waits for me. We fly up another thermal, and this happens again. Okay. By this time, on my glide ratio, if I don't get another thermal, I'm walking out off the glacier. So wind up this thermal now. I mean, we're getting towards the Mont Dolent now, right at the back of the Argentière Glacier. And he winds this thermal up. He looks and he goes, ah! and he heads off again. And I think, well, that's me. I can't. Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, I say, well, I didn't have the balls to go with him. But I mean, this was going to be a long walk out on the glacier not in a pair of mountain boots or anything. So I said goodbye to him. I thanked him very much. And I flew back, caught a couple of thermals, and literally scraped out of the Argentière Glacier, maybe 50 meters above the lip of the glacier. Went straight down to the landing field in Chamonix, landed, and then I just burst into tears. I was shaking all over. I thought, that is the most gobsmacking fucking spiritual experience of my life. And I waited for everyone else. And then they were going like, oh man, we were over the Aiguille Verte. We were at nearly, 4,500 meters, man. And I'm thinking, yeah, cool. I was in a different world. And the story doesn't finish there. Because 2 years later, I'm at the Brevant flying again. And it wasn't a very good day. It was, there was a few thermals going up here and there, but there was nothing spectacular. So I thought, all right, just go up and see. Took off. And then there's the thermal that breaks off the top of the Brevant bubbles that go up. And we call it the pompe à couillon. Because it means anybody can go up, and it's the arsehole's thermal. I mean, you've got to be stupid if you can't catch it. So went round, got this bubble that literally came up, and I skied out. And you could see when somebody gets a thermal on a bad day, everyone just starts coming in underneath you to try and get the same thing. I specced out, and nobody got it. And I could see people heading down towards the landing field, and I'm alone in the sky, way over Brevant. So I think, I'll head down towards the Aiguille des Ouches. Heading down there, over the Bellechat, and I get this same feeling coming through my chest. It's like this pounding feeling of something. And I'm looking around, and under me, there's 2 eagles come in. Under me. Wind up, and it's a couple, a male and a female. They come up onto my wingtip. The guy looks at me. He goes, "Ah!" and just flies off. And he'd come and shown and introduced me to his wife. He knew exactly who I was. And this is the kind of situation that I've lived all my life. Wow. I've been extremely lucky. I've been like every sport I've virtually touched: skiing, tennis, windsurfing, flying. I've been really good. But I think it's just the sports that have introduced me to the elements. Like when I did all the windsurfing, I had to sort of really give it up, but didn't have to give it up, but I was doing it in Scotland and then came to France, did it in France and stuff like that. And then it just trailed off. Is because I've realized, looking in hindsight, looking back, is that I didn't need to do it anymore. It was like I introduced the water element into my life. And then flying, I've got thousands of flights. And then one day I looked out my house window, it was going up, and I thought, I don't need to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. It's not that I didn't want to. I said, I just don't need to. And that day I got my parapont and I stuck it on eBay and I sold everything. And just to go on, it's introducing the air element, the water element. Mm-hmm. And it's this vision of, people can call it esoteric, but I think it's more just nature. I mean, mm-hmm. What is esotericism? It's the study of nature, basically, and what's going on. So
I noticed that, telling the story of the eagles, you looked like you were getting quite emotional there.
I usually cry
when
I tell that story. Yeah, it usually brings a tears to my eye. But
so when you said you're this has been happening all your life, I noticed in your bio there was some pretty interesting stuff that you've taken up. You went searching in caves in the Pyrenees for why don't you tell us about that?
The Grail quest.
Yes.
What is the Grail? It's it's the cup that collected the blood of Christ on the cross. It's the cup that was used at the Last Supper. It's also, I think, let's say the female image in esotericism, where the cup and then the sword is the masculine image. But in the Pyrenees, there was a culture called the Cathars, and they were a peaceful race of people, let's say, who were extremely religious, or spiritual, I think, and they lived their priestly class lived in the caves down there, and they accepted women as priests as well. They were completely unlike a normal religion, and they were actually the cause of the first genocide, actually, because the Pope at the time saw them as a threat. And so they basically went and wiped them out. It's very related to the Templar, the Knights Templar.
What sort of timescale are we talking here? What century? 15th, 16th, or even earlier?
12th, 13th, I think.
Oh, right, okay.
So they were peaceful, loving people, but their religious views were not accepted by the Pope, who basically told them to. Didn't tell them. He basically created the Inquisition and went after them to exterminate them. But these caves, the culture never died. The culture never died. I mean, they were protected by some of the Knights Templar. This is why the Knights Templar were also wiped out. John de Mornay, it was a coup monté, as we say, where the popes, they decided, and this is why Friday the 13th is considered bad luck. It's because on Friday the 13th there was an operation that basically seized a lot of the Templar properties, a lot of the Templar wealth, etc. Because the reason the Templar were not behind, they were helping the Cathars, is because the Knights Templar in Jerusalem, when they came back, they were a small order. They were monk warriors. They were a small order, and they came back laden with wealth. So there's all these conspiracies, these secrets, etc. But the Cathars, who are a well-documented race of people who were exterminated, basically, they lived a very simple life. And there's certain caves down in the Pyrenees where they lived, they worked, and they worshipped. And there is a rumor that after the crucifixion, that Mary actually came to the south of France. This is why you have like Saint-Marie sur Mer, and she spent time with the Cathars. And there's the rumor that the Grail was hidden here in France, because they say France is the heart chakra of the world. Certain schools of thought think that, and so there was the rumor that the sword and the Grail are here. So I went on a Grail quest, and more stories. We spent hours talking about the amazing things that happened while myself and my friend were down there. But we didn't find it physically, but I think I integrated it spiritually. Mm-hmm. And it's as I say, it's when I say to a lot of people about alchemy and all sorts of stuff, I think the important thing in life is not the destination. It's all about the journey. Everything is about the journey and not about the destination. So you don't need to find the object you're looking for. The fact is, your heart has told you to go find it. And it's the journey that you take and the experiences you have on that journey that actually integrate that energy into you. It's very similar to alchemical work. I mean, I make alchemical products that I can sell or I give to people, or I use for energetic healing of people. And people say, "Oh, wow, I've had this experience with these stuff, like the soul or the essential oil of a crystal, or whatever." And they just get blown away by it. And the fact is, I can actually take my own product and it doesn't do anything, which I find quite disappointing. But it's quite logical, actually, because it's the journey, it's making it. So I'm integrating all these energies into myself by actually taking the journey. And so I find it, at the end, it's almost sad when the product's finished. It's like being a mother who's carrying a baby for somebody else. You've nurtured it, and then you give birth to it, and it's a being within itself, and then you just give it to somebody else. So it's quite moving.
Well, before we go into a bit more into the alchemy, have you read the book The Alchemist by
Paulo Coelho?
Coelho, yeah.
I love one of his quotes.
Which one?
Wait, hold on. It'll come back to me. You
got it there.
If you think adventure is dangerous. Try routine. It's mortal.
It's deadly. Yeah.
It's deadly. Yeah.
So, a few people have told me to read that book, and it's called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho or Coelho. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Coelho. Right.
Coelho. And spoiler alert, still a fantastic book. I recommend anyone read it. It's a short read. It's a fantastic book, but the guy goes on effectively a quest to only discover the treasure was right by his home. So, you travel a long way to realize it was inside you, nearby you all the time. But also, when you talk about alchemy, for instance, Isaac Newton was an alchemist. Now, in the things that I've read is that the alchemy is, people think it's turning lead into gold, but it's actually more of it's an allegory for spirituality.
Yes and no.
Okay, good, because I know nothing about it.
Yes and no. Well, there's a few schools of thought that people say, well, alchemy is an allegory, and it can all be brought back to psychology. Bit with Freud and Carl Jung, the collective consciousness, and I mean, he wrote a great book called the Secret of the Transfer, I think it was called, which is comparing his own kind of school of psychology to some ancient alchemical texts, and there is correlation. But alchemy is all about correspondence. Everything has its correspondence, as we say, as above, so below, as within, so without, and it's the macrocosm and it's the microcosm. So the psychology and the way of thinking is alchemy. Yes, there is spiritual alchemy, there is intellectual alchemy, but there is also laboratory or operative alchemy. I mean, I'm an operative alchemist. I have a laboratory, I do experiences, I make product, and in the laboratory you can actually see these processes in action, because there is an alchemical precept, which is everything is made of the three principles, which are the salt, the sulfur, and the mercury. The salt, which is the body, the mercury, which is the spirit, and the sulfur, which is the soul. So it's like the Trinity. It is a Trinity, which has its correlation in a lot of religion, the Trinity. So everything can be broken down into those three principles, whether it is a plant. It's easy to understand with plants, because when you work with the plants, you can extract its essential oil. Okay, by steam distillation, you extract its essential oil. So you have what we call the sulfur principle, the soul of the plant, the color, you see it in there. Then you can ferment what's left over, and the universal mercury, as we say in the plant realm, is ethanol. That's how we make. I mean, spirit, soul, spirit, salt, spirit. We call whiskey a spirit. We call vodka a spirit. And that actually comes from alchemy. Is the spirit. So it's the spirit. And then once you've fermented that, all the residue, then you burn, you calcine, you take it down to a white ash, then you leach that ash with water, and then you can recrystallize that as a salt. And so you have the three principles. You have the salt, which is the body, the matrix of the body. You have the spirit, which is which is what animates that body. And then you have the soul, which is what is the soul? The soul is the actuating cause of your reality. It's that which decides where you go. It's that which decides what you do. It's that which is who is immortal. It's your divine self is your soul, whereas your spirit is what drives the vehicle, which is the body. Okay, so everything can be broken down into those three things, and that's not saying that the essential oil of a plant is the soul. It is the vehicle in which the soul manifests. The spirit, the alcohol, is the vehicle in which the spirit manifests, and the body is the body. And this can happen with minerals and metals, or absolutely anything can be reduced to its three principles. And that is the precept of alchemy. And then they can be recombined in different ways that will then create certain products or certain manifestations of reality. And so transforming lead into gold is not just an allegory, it is a physical possibility.
Yeah, I noticed you have a golden toilet. That's pretty well done. Just a joke. But what I would say is, what I would like to know is, are you using ancient texts for learning, or are you using modern scientific texts for learning, or is it a bit of both?
Interesting question. A lot of the research that we do today, or the lab alchemy that we do today, is based on ancient text. The problem with the ancient text, they are all in code. They're all in imagery. They are all in allegory. And so you need to decode them. And there are ways of decoding them. There are certain things, I mean, a bit like alchemical imagery is we have the king and the queen. Well, the king is gold. The queen is what? It's silver or mercury. So we have those kind of symbols, and then we have the old man, which could be Saturn. It's all fairly complicated, but once you actually get your head around it, it can be used. So to come back to your question of the old texts and modern techniques, I mean, you've seen my lab. I mean, I've got a lot of modern machinery in there, which just speeds up distillations and certain operations. The thing about alchemy, it's not about recipes. It's not like there are no alchemical recipe books, or there are some that touch on that give you an idea. But the idea is to get you into the process, and then you start playing with it yourself. And the other precept of alchemy, which is as within, so without, and as without, so within, or as above, so below, is the fact that when you are working on matter, how does your consciousness affect that matter? And how does that matter affect your consciousness? And these are things that alchemists have known for centuries, millennia. And modern science is just starting to realize that. It's like the slit experience, or the Heidsieck principle in quantum physics, where they actually understand now and accept that the observer affects the experiment, and the result of the experiment will not be the same depending on who's observing it. And you are an integral part of the experience when you are present during an experiment. And that is exactly how alchemy works.
So you mean we're talking mind over matter, mind above matter, mind before matter,
and mind with matter,
okay,
and matter over mind, and because it's a two-way street. I mean, this is why I'm saying that I can create a product through alchemical processes that will have an effect on somebody, but the fact is they will not have an effect on me, is because during the process of making the product is that my intention, my consciousness has been symbiotic with the matter with which I'm working on. And that matter has actually affected me while I'm working on it, or with it, I like to say. And that's why my products don't affect me. It's the journey. And so it's a two-way street. And as soon as I think modern science is starting to realize that it is a two-way street, because we're just vibration.
So when I mentioned that, do you use the ancient text? When you said they're coded, do you mean what they're actually is? They're old stories or old parables, or is that what you mean? Or they're not in fact written down, are they? They're old stories, which if you can decode, or are there actual old scripts that you can read?
There are old scripts. There are old manuscripts, and probably one of the greatest, I would think, alchemical texts to read for any budding alchemist who would like to know a bit about it. Takes a bit of getting your head around the way it's written, but it's called The Golden Chain of Homer, which I think is the golden chain. It basically describes how reality manifests and how it circulates back to non-manifestation. It's not religious. It's just, it explains the cycle. I mean, when you're an alchemist, you can look in nature, and you can see the trees growing and, the clouds and the snow and the water and stuff. Everything is alchemical. It is an alchemical cycle that is going on permanently. I mean, the water cycle is an alchemical cycle. How plants grow. I mean, transferring, because in alchemy we work in the realms, let's say. We work in the plant realm, which is usually quite forgiving. And then there's the mineral, and then there's the metallic realms, which are usually not forgiving, because we're working at very high temperature with extremely toxic substances, that we end up, making completely bioavailable and non-toxic and have amazing curative powers. But, and the earth does the same. When a plant pushes its roots down, it's pushing its roots down into what? It's pushing its roots down into the mineral realm of the earth, and it's taking on these minerals and mineral salts within itself and creating something vegetable. So we're already going from a mineral realm into a vegetable realm. And then let's say a cow comes along and eats that grass, and then we eat the cow. And so it's going from the mineral to the vegetable to the animal, and then the human realm, and it's transferring through realms. And alchemy is all about realm jumping, how to take one kind of information, because it's all information. I mean, you and I, we're sitting here looking at each other, and your eyes are perceiving me, but what am I? I mean, it's your brain that's translating all this. It's your brain it's translating all these electromagnetic frequencies that are vibrating. It's a bit like the Matrix, that makes you look at a human being in front of you. But it's your mind that's creating that.
So have you, apart from the Eagles, have you had any teachers along your way?
Teachers?
Or has anyone actually found you, or have you found someone who's taught you, or how has it worked?
The alchemical community is pretty closed.
Well, maybe the spiritual side then.
Yeah, well, no, the alchemical community is pretty closed, but put it this way, I never thought I'd say this, but thank you, Instagram. Because I've met so many other alchemists on Instagram, and I mean, I've even associated one, is Daniel, who's with us now in Helvetia, an alchemist from Canada, who's just an amazing person. And yeah, that's thanks to Instagram. So you meet people along the way. As I say, it's the journey. I'm not one for having teachers or whatever. I think life takes you where you need to go. Life is the teacher. I mean, as I say in my bio, I'm mulling with a degree from the University of Life. So,
but you haven't actually come across someone who I'm not going to say followed like a devotee or anything, but someone who because I've met a few people who I've hung around with for as long as I can, because I learn a lot from them. Is there anything like that happen to you? Or?
Yeah, but people, a few alchemical books, let's say Robert Bartlett, who's one of today's greatest living alchemists. So he's got some interesting books. So learn tips and stuff from him. It gives you avenues of research. Again, via Instagram, there's probably one of the greatest living alchemists still, John H. Reed III. In the US, he actually contacted me, and we exchange regularly, and it's just a genius. So, but they don't tell you what to do. They give you avenues of research, these old masters and then they say, oh, try that. And you go down that road, and suddenly you're discovering other things. So it's that the adventure.
Mm-hmm. So you haven't had anyone come along who's some sort of spiritual master and say,
no, I am not at all into hierarchy. I've been invited into spiritual groups and stuff, and I've just said, fuck off. I am not a group person, because I believe I mean, it's a bit like, I don't like religion, but I am probably the most religious person that you could ever imagine. I mean, I don't believe in God. I know God exists. I mean, I've seen too much stuff. I've seen far too much stuff on the other side here in life to doubt that we are just that he exists, or it exists, or she, or I don't know. What are you allowed to say nowadays? I mean, I'm so fucking unwoke. It's but magical groups, group things. The problem with a group in any kind of esoteric circle is that inevitably you end up in hierarchy. And hierarchy means what? It's ego, and there's people at the top. And I like to think, with the people who come to see me and I help them out and stuff, is that I would like them to be better than me. It's like when you have a child, you want your child to do better than you. You want to lift them up. You want to exalt them. You want them to carry what you know further and to be the best that they can be. And that's all about it. And when people come to me, I freely share alchemical information if you ask the right questions. And say, please go, try, do it. I'll give you all that you need and stuff. But groups, any kind of spiritual development group, any kind of alchemical group, who cares? Or any kind of group, there is always hierarchy. And the person at the top usually likes to stay there, and he doesn't want to be surpassed. And so in magical groups, I mean, I know a lot about magic, and in magical groups where you would get to a certain level, let's say, and then you need to make a pact. It's usually with something quite dodgy, to make a pact to get more power and this, that, and the other. So it's all about control. Yeah. I think you need to create your own link with God. God is not in a building somewhere. You know, he's not in a church. He's not in a mosque. He's nowhere like that. He's there. He's in your heart. He always has been. So why go somewhere and go through someone to actually access him or her or whatever it is? The higher force is always there. It's around us. I mean, if you want to know that God exists, look out the fucking window. Yeah.
Every single text, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all of these that are all around the world, all says the same thing. You don't look outside, you have to look inside. Now, I guess the question would be from that is, what are you looking for inside? What is it you're looking for inside that's going to help you find God?
What are we looking for inside? That's asking, what's the destination? The fact is, you start looking inside. You don't have to look inside for anything in particular. Just go on the journey, and the journey will take you where you need to go, and you will find what you need to find. There is no goal. The goal is just to exist and be here and enjoy life. That's what it's all about. And to look inside, when you look inside, that doesn't mean to be egotistical. That means to find out, what are your shortcomings? How can I improve?
And you, do you ever, when you're on your spiritual quest, if that's the right word, have you ever used, what would you call them? Herbs or something you can take to your body?
Ethnogenic medicines.
Ethnogenic medicines. I was going to say something else. Drugs. But not drugs.
Psychoactive compounds.
Yeah.
As a tool, yes, but not to develop, just to research within myself. I mean, I'm a big proponent of psilocybin, that's for sure.
But did you learn that from someone, or did you just learn that from
life?
Going ham, taking it yourself and seeing how you get on?
Yeah, but following suggestions from other psychonauts or other researchers. I mean, say a lot of the plant alchemy I do is based around mushrooms anyway, because I think they are, without doubt, some of the most interesting things on the planet. I mean, they are half vegetable, half animal, basically, and they have their own intelligence. I mean, there's a great film called Fantastic Fungi that I recommend everybody watch. That is just the most mind-blowing journey into the mycelium environment, and then and they touch on psychoactive drugs, well, psilocybin basically, or magic mushies, as we used to call them back in the day, which do open up other fields of consciousness, I think, which are locked inside. We can access them other ways, but it is definitely an ejector seat out into big time reality. I mean, the Johns Hopkins University has done some really interesting studies over the last few years for end-of-life trauma. People have been diagnosed with life-threatening diseases and don't have long to live. Instead of giving them antidepressants, they will have like one hero's dose or a big trip, guided, not just off on their own, but a guided trip where they've usually come back saying they felt at one with reality. They realize that death is not the big deal that everyone makes it out to be, and they're comfortable with their own mortality. And what's interesting is after one trip, or let's say 2 trips, they don't have to do it again for another 6 months, another year. So they don't have to take all this medication. And in post-traumatic stress syndrome, thinking what it can be used for with, let's say, anorexia, certain mental disorders, and then link that with things like fasting, which is another amazing tool for health. But so psilocybin, definitely interesting. There's huge development in the US now. It's starting to be legalized in certain states. The Silicon Valley have always been microdosing because it stimulates creativity, and they're all after the next creative thing to advance all these apps and stuff like that. And so microdosing is definitely very interesting. And then the other dose, which is heroes dosing, which is the rocket trip out into a bigger universe.
Yeah. Well, I learned an interesting thing that Crick and Watson, the guys who discovered the double helix DNA, they were basically at an impasse. They knew they were very close, but they couldn't quite figure out how it all came together. And then they took LSD, and then they had a revelation during their trip and came back, and then that was the final piece of the puzzle. And that's when they subsequently won the Nobel Prize for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the great thing about, let's say, mushrooms as well is that there's another interesting mushroom that I think Paul Stamets talked about it, and I mean, I'm working with it as well now. It's the lion's mane mushroom, the crinière de lion in French. But the lion's mane mushroom, the studies that have been done on it, mainly in Japan, they've actually realized that it has neurogenerative properties, where it will push new neural pathways, and which is great for things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, memory, stroke, people with strokes, AVCs, where they thought that this part of the brain is damaged. That's it. You're fucked. But now, I mean, this mushroom actually pushes new neural pathways, and the idea of stacking that with, let's say, microdosing psilocybin, you can probably push them in the direction you want them to go. And I think this is going to be the new paradigm of human development. I think, and evolution is working on the brain.
Yeah, because he mentions a certain amount of psilocybin, so many grams of psilocybin with the lion's mane, and also niacin, I think. Because when you take niacin, you get that sort of, feels like a hot flush you're getting, and he says that simultaneously stimulates the nerves, opening the pathways for the lion's mane and the psilocybin. So that's very, very interesting. I haven't tried it. Wouldn't mind. See how it goes. I
mean, the fact is, I made a spagyric extract of lion's mane and psilocybin, but the problem is with psilocybin and extractions, which I know now, is that psilocybin is extremely affected by temperature. So you use too much temperature, and basically the psilocybin oxidizes and you lose it. So I made this extract, and it wasn't as potent as I thought it was going to be. But now cold extraction is the name of the game. So
wow, interesting.
And this is it. You learn as you go along.
So I guess if we can wrap it up, but through your alchemy and your experimentation and your plant analysis of all these different things that they can do, how do you help patients then? How does that help? What can you use to help them? And what kind of things what kind of ailments or illnesses can you help with?
Oof.
Or which ones can't you help with?
The fact is, I am not a medical doctor, so
we're going to have a disclaimer on the end of this, don't worry.
A big disclaimer. The fact is, being a bioenergetician is that when I do a session with somebody, I do not get involved, really. It's their body telling me what they need, what's blocked, what needs repairing, what's up here, what's up there in the body. And so basically I'm just following the body's instructions. So I'm not using any kind of intellect or any kind of pseudo education, or what I think I know to say, I think you should take this. I think you should do that. Basically it's the body's just telling me. Said, I've got this blockage, and then I'll find out, oh, what do you need? And the body will tell me what it needs. And so all I'm doing is I'm just giving the body what it needs. But the products, you work a lot with essential oils, and it's informational medicine, basically. It's sending information into the body where it's needed.
But can you do that? I mean, for instance, you just met us. Did you pick stuff up straight away just from meeting people, or do you have to sit and think about it, or not think about it?
The fact is, I can, but I don't. I put filters up because otherwise you
become overwhelmed
and inundated. Yeah. And I just everything's closed off, and I turn it on when I need to.
I mean, could you give us some examples of how you've helped people?
Getting more into a lot of the work I do is based on, or a lot of the problems. Put it another way, people tend to come to you with the problems that you're good at solving. And this is something I've realized over the years. And, a lot of the problems that people have, one of my specialities is parasitic energetic entities, basically. We're getting a bit more into the paranormal now.
Please do. We're all about that.
But the people attract parasitic entities, let's say, because through resonant frequency. Because these parasitic entities, there's a whole gamut range of them. But the most basic, let's say, would be a disincarnated soul that's floating around. And the fact is that they're here because A, they haven't made the passage, or B, there's something that's holding them here. But to be here, to keep manifesting here in whatever form or other, they need energy. They need to feed. And so they feed on what we call low vibration. Things like fear, anger, depression, things like that. And they will jump onto the body when your body resonates with that frequency. So let's say you go onto a tube train late at night. It's the last train that's there, that's going to come in, and you're all alone. It's dark, and then somebody else walks onto the platform, and suddenly you think, ooh, suddenly you're resonating with fear. And the entities that are hanging around can sense this, and they'll jump onto you, usually at the base of your spine, between your kidneys, on your back. And then, but they can be between your shoulder blades, solar plexus, and then we're getting into more technical stuff. But these entities will jump on, they will parasite you. Okay? It's vampirism. The fact is, these parasites aren't evil. They're just needing to exist. And so they're feeding off you. And so, a lot of people will come with these kind of parasitic entities because they've got a bad back, this, that, and the other. I mean, there was a carpenter here. He'd got hundreds of them on him, being parasited at the base of his spine. He'd had chronic back pain for like 15 years. He came, took those away. A week later, he's no back pain. Simple like that. But to marry into coincidence again is I got a phone call one day from a lady locally, and she said, "Oh, are we still good for the appointment?" I said, "Sorry, what are you talking about?" She goes, "Oh, because you're a geobiologist. Yeah. Well, we met at this party, and you gave me your phone number, and I'm ringing to see if you can, if you can organise the meeting. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I sort of looked at my wife and I thought, oh my God, is it Alzheimer's already? I can't even remember this. And it turns out that it wasn't me that she'd met, and I said to her, I said, okay, it's for well, I happen to be also a geobiologist. I said, but I'm sure that my confrère will be able to help you out and stuff like that. But please, tell me how you get on, and if you've got any problems, give me a ring back, stuff like that. So okay, cool. And a few weeks later, it was sticking in my mind a little bit, and so I looked back at my texts and I rang the lady, and I said, "How did you get on?" If you don't mind me asking. She goes, "Well, I don't really know." I said, "Well, what was the problem?" And she goes, "Well, I don't know. It's probably not your field, being a geobiologist." But she goes, "It was a paranormal problem." I said, "Oh, funny you should say that." I said, "That is my speciality." And so she explained, and I said, "Well, because her daughter, who was like 7 years old, or 6, had been having visitations from this woman or whatever, and at night, and she got this geobiologist to come who analysed the house, took away a couple of spirits, apparently put some stones in the corner and stuff like that. And I said, "Well, has it been solved?" And she goes, "Well, no, the lady came back. She seemed a bit angry, apparently." And I said, "Well, if it's gone, they're gone. That's it. It's not if or when or maybe." I said, "It either works or it doesn't." I said, "Well, where do you live?" And she just gave me an address. She goes, "Well, I don't really have any money." I said, "Well, how much did the guy charge?" And he goes, "Like €450. And I said, "Well, no, I'll come for your daughter." I said, "I will ask for 1 symbolic euro if I can help you." I said, and she said, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, because it's your daughter we're talking about here." So I went over that. 10 minutes later, I was over there, took all my kit, and I went, and she answered the door, and it was a modern building that had been built, the year before in Cham. I was thinking, what's it built on? Is it built on an old graveyard? Something like that. And then went into the lounge, and the little girl came out of the bedroom, and it's like, oof. And I turned to the lady and I said, "The problem ain't your house." I said, "The problem's in your daughter." And she goes, "What?" And so I sat the daughter down and got my bioenergetic kit that you can see there. And so I didn't want to shock the daughter at all. So I just said, "Oh, I'll give you a check over like this." And while I'm checking over, I'm basically exercising her. And at the end, she said, I said, "Right, that'll be €1." And the little girl went, and she went, "Hold on, I'll come back." She came, the daughter, and she'd emptied a piggy bank of cents and 10 cents and stuff, and there's €1 in there that I carry around ever since.
You still have it here?
Yeah, I still have it, yeah. And I said, "Well, okay, that should be fine now." I said, "If you've got any problems, give me a ring." And I rang her a week later, and there was no problems. The lady had gone.
And why would you think it would manifest on a little girl? 6
Because actually, I mean, the fact is, the other thing that happened, I said, "Well, how long has she had this problem with this lady?" And she said, "Well, a couple of years." I said, "Well, how long have you lived here?" And she goes, "Well, 5 months." And it came from another house or another house before that. It's been following this girl. So who knows why? I mean, I don't try and analyze it too much. It's just in and out and stuff like that. And I actually asked the lady, I said, well, it's really weird. I said, because how did you get my number? She goes, I've no idea. She said, I looked at this geobiologist card. I tapped the number on this other geobiologist card and got through to you. And this is I just looked up into the sky and I thought, thank you. It was, that's how it works, that it comes along. And she tried to get in touch with somebody else and accidentally got in touch with me. And then
on
the
purpose.
Accidentally on purpose.
Yeah. How do you, what are you bringing to the athletes and the clients with your skills?
With my skills is, it's actually a nice change to actually work with healthy people because normally it's people with serious problems. In the performance field, well, I've been a pro sportsman. I've done high-level sport all my life, and the chance to give something back, I think, and to help people be the best that they can be. Because these sports people, they've got a lot more problems than you actually think. How to manage their energy, the blockages, the psychological problems that that affect the body and the way they act. And so to actually be able to fine tune these people to give them that 0.25% more that they need to tip them over into total excellence.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Well, Roger, that's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I foresee, hopefully, if you're up for it, we can do some more of these chats because I feel they're going to be very popular.
Hundreds more stories.
Oh, yes. Well, Roger Lambert, I have to say, that's absolutely fascinating. Loved it. A very quick hour. And thank you very much. And we'll hopefully get you back on soon.
It'll be a pleasure.
Great. Thank you very much.